little bit of a delay on this one. For some reason, when I talk into the live stream, my voice changes, and I have no idea why. I can't stop it, people. Once I get more relaxed, you'll hear a different accent come through, I believe. Now, what do we want to look at today? Well, I wanted to know about a day ago, maybe two now, losing track of time, what pulse chains transaction per second will be or is. Because what's happening, Tin Top? I was curious. I was digging around, doing some internet sleuthing, and I couldn't find that particular answer. So, as we saw, the stress tests are taking place, and we saw, large volumes of transactions going through per day. But this is why I love the Hexagon community and the soon-to-be PulseChain community, etc., etc. The amount of teaching that is available, I never really thought about Ethereum and its transactions per second. I assumed the numbers would be extremely large because, the global internet computer, be able to handle massive amounts of transactions. Now I understand more why cryptocurrencies are most likely unable to hold, when I say hold, I mean function, maintain a game like World of Warcraft's economy. Now, not familiar with that game. I've heard that saying before, but now I understand why. Because I thought, well, what's a transaction per second? Well, transaction per second turns out, I came across this website. I have no affiliation or anything, but I thought this is, if accurate, is pretty useful to know. And we see here maximum recorded TPS for Ethereum is 56.88. So, to be honest, that's not a lot. Now, we all know this in cryptocurrency. Now, 576, that's pretty impressive. However, then you look at the current TPS, and it's almost like if this was a particular, a sporting team, not just one person, but a team, I guess because there's a group of computers behind it, you would be like, okay, so this one has won something. But currently it's a long gap between wins. This one is pretty reliable because its average is higher, so the amount of wins it's had is performing greater than some of these other ones. Because I'm looking at these other figures, I'm like, okay, 0.14, 2.22. Now, I sent a tweet out asking them if they can actually include PulseChain on this because they've got coming soon. So I'm not sure if they're aware of PulseChain. But we see here basically Ethereum currently running at 24.02. Now, this tweet, I'm not sure if it was maximum test, and the maximum figure was 53 TPS. I'm not sure if that is the current TPS. So we see here 56.8 was maximum. So it was PulseChain's actually 53 max. So it still was not faster than Ethereum, the maximum recorded. But yeah, I don't know those figures yet. If anyone knows, share them, I would say, because it's useful to know these sort of things. Now, the next thing I was wondering about, this makes me curious. If Ethereum gets its sharding, right? Just stay with me. And PulseChain doesn't have sharding. Could PulseChain then be forked again or upgraded to have sharding? That would be, or maybe it's just implemented, I don't know. But if it was, say, forked again, whatever the correct terminology is, it could lead to multiple versions of Hex, as we've seen with Ethereum proof of work, Ethereum Fair, soon to be PulseChain, and then imagine if Ethereum increases its capacity, sharding's implemented. The way I read it, it reminds me of I don't know if you guys remember back in the day, was it LimeWire, Kazaa networks, torrents, and you'd download little segments anyway, and that's the way I understand it. It seems to be the transactions go through in little chunks. Now, the capacity on sharding seems to be a shit ton relative to everything else currently in existence in terms of if it's stable. What I mean by stable is if maximum is 56, current is 24. To me, that's pretty stable. Like this one's like 5.58, currently 0. Not so stable, you know. Maximum 576, currently 0.14, not so stable. That's what I'm saying. Now, the next thing would be, yeah, so that's just some food for thought. Just imagine later on, if there was, you know, a potential fork of PulseChain to include sharding to make it even better. I don't know if it would even be even cheaper. You know, what could be? Maybe we live in a world where there's multiple versions. I'm not sure. But it's just something to also think about. And basically, the longer you sort of wait within the Richard Heart ecosphere, the better things tend to get. Now, you could say, well, look at the price of Hex. Yeah, okay. But how much Hex have you got relative to, you know, inception or your first investment? If you've burnt it and you're likely to, if you're soon to mint some, you've most likely got more, mathematically speaking. And, you know, with the highs come the lows, and with the lows come the highs. Now, moving on, just some random internet sleuthing and some thinking out loud here on my part. We have the HSI auctions. Now, you might have noticed, I'm not sure if you're following, not the HSI auction so much, but the amount of yield you're getting, because I'm assuming you've burnt Hex and you're potentially minting. I don't know if you have, you might be minting some Hedron, and maybe you're engaging with the Icosa system, and you're maybe seeing, you know, Icosa and Hedron calculation of figures. And it's like, why is it higher today? Well, I went back and had a quick look, and there was a, you know, larger T shares on offer over here. Seems to lead to higher daily figures, the yield, I guess you could call it. Now, there's the largest one here, maybe about 25-ish, 30-ish, and you see them there at a pretty decent discount. I mean, you're not locked away 100% because you can sell it, yeah, or you can sell it back to the system. I don't know, but if you wanted to, people could go grab these for a reasonable discount, you know, and then hold 5555. Maybe it turns out good, you know, maybe you get an insane return on investment. It's hard to say because it needs to pass 15 years before you can actually do any sort of analysis on return on investment for those periods, as we see with, say, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 15 year, 30 year bonds. Now, the next thing, so we're covering PulseChain TPS, looks good relative to the other networks. My theory that, you know, if Ethereum ever does get sharding, that could mean what for, you know, the forks? Could it be another fork? I'm not sure. Maybe by then, as we've seen with testnets, things have become extremely proficient at forking, but who knows? I just thought I would point that out. The next thing, so this here, no end crypto Wild West as government goes slow on regulation, right? So it's a good read. I'm not going to give you long story short because I'm just going to cover a little section. The little section that I thought relevant to the crypto space. This is Australia, so it might be relevant to your area of the world. But it says here in the closing statement, since briefings, crypto markets have snapped back. The prices of Bitcoin and Ethereum have risen more than 30% this year, suggesting there's still investor appetite for the risky volatile markets. Now, it also says they are, I don't know where my highlighting went, saying they, you know, going a little bit slower, and, you know, highlighted areas where it failed. Now, this is where I think some other Hexagons all got together and we pointed out to them, you know, things like FTX, they were actually committing crimes and breaking the law, and if the people did not give control of their crypto to the criminals, they would not have lost their crypto. Sounds harsh, but it's true. 100% true. Again, this is why I love the Hexagon community. Teaching not your keys, not your coins. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm almost 100% certain that is a talking point derived from Richard Heart himself. Because prior to that, you know, that slogan, that phrase, those words uttered, there was no speak of it at all. I had never heard of it. It became common amongst Hexicans, is now trickled all the way through to mainstream crypto advertising, I would say. Not direct ads, but you see, you know, when they're talking on Twitter, not your keys, not your coins, and similar things. It's like, hang on. Pumpermentals, not your keys, not your coins. A lot of this stuff has derived from Richard Hart himself, I would say, and popularized by the Hexicans. Simple as that. So in the future, I can't help but think a lot of Hexicans are going to be extremely famous in one way or another. Back to this, the crypto token mapping, saying that it's gonna be slower. And if I can find it live on stream, where is it? I really want to find it before, you know, I show you the next riveting clip from Gary Gensler himself. Now, I couldn't imagine why, you know, the governments in power currently are going slow on this, because it is so blatantly obvious how clear and how great their understanding is of crypto. That is to say, I'm sure they're all experts in the field. They are studying blockchain, they're studying transactions, they're studying everything. Like, they're studying and building and developing new technologies as we speak. Now, I'm sure the politicians are doing that, because the same politicians that are telling you, you know, we should clamp down on this crypto because it's evil. It reminds them of cash, and cash is used in crimes. This is basically the same sort of response you want to get from them here.
I'm asking you, sit in your chair now.
Now, I'm not sure if the audio is coming through, but this is, you know, where Australia would be taking the lead from in regards to cryptocurrency. Here we go. Now, I can't imagine why anyone would have any doubts, you know, any reasonable doubts as to what cryptocurrency is.
I'm asking you, sit in your chair now to make an assessment under the laws as exist. Is Ether a commodity or a security?
Without speaking to anyone.
I know you've repeatedly said you're not going to speak to one, except you've spoken to one, Bitcoin. So I'm asking you to speak to a second one, the second largest market cap here.
And speaking to the tokens, there's 10 to 12,000. If there's a group of entrepreneurs in
I'm asking about one.
The public is anticipating a profit based on the...
I'm asking you a specific question, Chair Gensler. Is Ether a commodity or security?
And again, it depends on the facts and the law, and if there's a group of individuals...
I'm asking you about the facts and the law.
Mr. Chair, I think you would not want me to prejudge, because I'm also...
But you have prejudged on this. You've taken 50 enforcement actions. We're finding out as we go, as you file suit, as people get Wells notices on what is a security in your view, in your agency's view. I'm asking...
So, I couldn't imagine where the uncertainty is coming from. Now, I think this is going to be an area we need to closely monitor and keep pushing back. Now, I'm pretty sure it's probably about day 10 or so into the comments that can be provided in the US. However, I'm not over exactly what is going on with that. I believe there are some larger entities within the crypto space, like Coinbase, putting forth commentary. So that is a very good thing to see. However, it's a little bit cringe that we see centralized exchanges coming to the rescue of decentralized. However, when you think about it, and when you have a look at platforms that are centralized, a lot of the background is actually DeFi, and they don't want to admit that. They have CeFi at the front and at the back, where they're making some money that you may not be aware of. Basically what I'm saying, on their platforms, they giving you and showing how and teaching you about decentralized finance. And it's very, very interesting. This is why I find this whole battle very vital in the it's vital for humanity, basically, is what I'm saying. Because if you remember this quote, if you fix money, you fix the world. What is the current problems? We're seeing, you know, kings being inaugurated or whatever at the moment, but yet at the same time we're seeing some countries on the verge of World War III. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't it be good to stop some of these wars instead of having a huge celebration about the new king? Now, maybe some politicians and not hierarchical. What are they called? Dynasties. Can't think of the word at the moment. But some groups, you know, would rather celebrate the anointment of a new king instead of trying to stop World War III's. But I'm guilty of analyzing the war also, so I'll continue on. We have here a decline, AP, no. We have here basically this. I found this interesting. You know, fix money, fix the world, but currently the world's pretty bad. The money's pretty bad, and so we're all working on how to fix it. Meanwhile, the US Patriot system has knocked out reportedly a Russian hypersonic, which I found fascinating. I did not know this was a capability, battle-tested capability. Now, before I close out, I could cover a large section of where is it? I could read and share a large section of just a reminder why politicians and processes, it is important to question them. Now, I will share it. However, I won't share the screen, but I'll read to you. Because, you know, I think people need to hear this, and if no one else is going to tell them, then, you know, how are they going to hear it? I'll put up on the screen this, because I found this interesting. This is how I was going to close out. Proof of soon, PULSECHAIN. This is the way. Now, that's kind of cool. I like that. We'll just see. Is it this month, or is it in 6 months? Now, the same politicians that are unable to determine what a cryptocurrency is and who have led us to the brink of World War III and have allowed bank failures, you know, not completely 100% all their fault, but, you know, they've played their part in this whole situation that we're currently in. Quite often you see the answer to government is more government, and it's just frustrating because the inefficiencies that exist, you know, would you trust more, code or man? I wonder. The man can lie, the code cannot. However, we're ruled by men, are we? They are put into power by us. However, if we all decide we don't want to put any input in, then it's not the politicians you want, it's the politicians you have, I believe is a similar saying. But the next thing. These are the days of grasping for excuses. Now, I'm not taking credit for this at all. This is from Jeffrey Tucker. It's from an email that I received. I can share with family and friends this. Now, where is it? It's in regards to the editor's note. Those who impose lockdowns and vaccine mandates on society are presently trying to deflect blame from themselves. This publication will not let them, nor will my streams, nor will a lot of other people who believe there's, you know, good in the world still, nor will Jeffrey Tucker. Today's Jeffrey shows you how they created a false impression of widespread deaths in order to terrify you. Dear myself, these are the days of grasping for excuses in sector after sector. Leaders who gave us lockdowns and all that followed are trying to account for their actions, not apologizing, of course, but admitting that in the classic formulation, mistakes were made. That said, they are all agreed on the core point. The government had to take a big step. The government had to take big steps to deal with the pandemic. A book just released from the original lockdown gangsters, about which I will write more later. A book celebrated by the Washington Post as the authoritative account puts it this way. American leaders entering the COVID war plunged ahead with a breathtaking political and social experiment. Facing a dangerous pandemic, they adopted the broadest, most ambitious and intrusive set of government controls on social behavior in the history of the United States. Given the lack of preparation at all levels of government, mistakes were inevitable and to be expected, perhaps even excusable. Excusable is the new watchword, and Anthony Fauci has picked it up. In a recent interview, he admits that many things went wrong, but adds, "I don't think anyone would argue with the fact that you had to shut down." Freezer trucks as a propaganda tool. This is a heading, if you can imagine, in big, bold, black letters and a picture of freezer trucks. Then he adds what he clearly considers the key talking point. We know because he has said this in several interviews. He says that the obvious disaster of freezer trucks at hospitals signaled and proved the desperate need for lockdowns. Notice too how CNN had a terrifying graphic ready to run alongside his comments. This is still particularly evocative with the Statue of Liberty in the background. Not that anyone would suggest that this was staged, he said with a nudge. Now, this literally shows you images captured from CNN that was shown. They weren't even from March or April of 2020. The Daily Mail ran them alongside an article posted on May 6, noting that the images were from May 6 and May 7, 2020. So the excuse that we had to lock down because of freezer trucks does not hold water. The lockdown edict was issued on March 16th, 2020, following the declaration of emergency on March 13, 3 days after Trump's advisors convinced him to issue the lockdown. In that time, the funeral parlors and morgues closed too. Now, YouTube, I am reading from a open newsletter which I can share with whom I wish. This is not monetized, and I've explained that I'm not taking credit for this work. I'm merely reading some words. So please, YouTube, before too many words trigger your algos to review this, take that into account carefully, because decentralized media is coming and there's nothing you can do about it. But for the time being, we shall let you exist. But in that time, the funeral parlors and morgues closed too, as did most all medical services. The country was also in panic, which is not generally good for public health. Heading: was it necessary COVID? Was it necessarily COVID that was killing people? Question mark. Big, bold, black letters. That there was a wave of death in those 2 weeks is clear. What is not clear is whether that was COVID alone. After all, the virus had been circulating in the US for a while. The period of 15 days was also the time when intubation was deployed as the best method to deal with a seemingly problematic COVID case, resulting in many unnecessary deaths. What's crucial here is the timing. 2 weeks following the lockdowns, the news media began running alarmist stories of the legendary freezer trucks at hospitals, giving the impression of a movie-like pandemic sweeping the country, whereas the problem was centered in only a few locations. These stories ran for a full month throughout April and into May. Remember this about 3 years ago where we were, people? Anyway, moving on. On March 29th, 2020, the New York Times quoted Trump himself, "I have been watching them bringing in trailer trucks, freezer trucks, because they can't handle the bodies. There are so many of them. This is in essentially my community in Queens, New York. I've seen things that I've never seen before." Not much of this makes sense in this very period. New York City hospitals saw an overall 50% drop in admissions, which is what happens when you close down all services to spare all resources for one virus. If you add to that a shutdown of the entire industry of funerals, funeral homes, morgues, and cemetery services, one can imagine that a crisis would ensue. Heading: no wonder why the bodies piled up. Big, bold, black letters, if you can imagine that. Even the normal embalming protocols were disrupted on the advice of the WHO and the CDC. The bodies of the dead were treated as icky and untouchable, and this attitude was encouraged by authorities. Workers were terrified. It's hardly surprising that bodies piled up and needed to be stored. The whole population, and especially the health community, was told that the whole of life should be organized around running away from the bad bug. These events unfolded 2 weeks following essentially the same events in Italy. Morgues closed. The normal process of dealing with the dead was dramatically interrupted. Workers were at home, funerals were banned, and this ban was heavily enforced. Medical personnel were especially terrified of the death. Think back 3 years ago, people. Think back. Remember. All of the factors led to a pile-up of bodies in the midst of a panic. The chaos caused by the panic itself was deployed by the media and used as an excuse by government to intensify and prolong lockdowns. This is like shouting fire in a crowded theater and citing the ensuing panic as the reason for an evacuation order. The fomenting of the panic itself created the conditions for the panic managers to enhance their own power. In this case, however, the ploy is pretty obvious simply because of the timing. The freezer truck excuse frankly does not fit the timeline. More Fauci double talk. Heading: big, bold letters. Or we can give Fauci the most charitable interpretation of his comments and say that he cited the freezer trucks as evidence that they did the right thing in locking down 2 weeks or 1 month earlier. Even then, if that is his thinking, that doesn't justify the initial lockdown at all. It only cites the evidence of the failed policy as the reason for the policy itself. In addition, the problem was localized, whereas the shutdown was countrywide. This led to a bizarre situation in which hospitals all over the country were empty of the usual stream of patients. People missed diagnostics, they missed elective surgeries. At least 300 hospitals furloughed nurses because they had nothing to do except practice dance routines and put the results on TikTok. All of this transpired at a time when Fauci and Trump were going on about mass waves of death. Indeed, in this exact period, healthcare spending actually declined by 8.6% on the urging of intellectuals and officials from February. Hospitals all over the country closed their services at the very time when they were likely needed most. Big bold letters heading: never forget. Gone was any serious discussion about how to treat COVID other than to invoke ventilation and remdesivir, which was a disaster. Early treatment was dogmatically rejected as nothing but a quack cure. How many people needlessly died because they were denied effective early treatment? We may never know, but I believe the number is probably staggering. All efforts, even from the earliest days, were focused on the vaccine as the only way to get out of the pandemic. Regardless of the excuse, the public relations team that defends the lockdowns never mentions Sweden, because this case demonstrates that panicked rights violations are generally not a good path for boosting public health in the case of a new virus that newly appears in the awareness of powerful people. To this day, no one can give a clear official reason how or why this happened or what was achieved by it all relative to the cost. Even so, they will not admit that their entire lockdown paradigm was wrong from the very beginning. They should, but they will not. It was just implemented poorly and inefficiently. It should have never happened at all, and it should never happen again. Never forget what they did, never. Alright, that was brilliantly written by Jeffrey Tucker for the Daily Reckoning. Now, in closing, just remember, just have a think when these politicians are trying to have their say on how they think the world should operate, and if you think you should just say nothing and just blindly agree with what it is that they are saying, and what maybe you might feel it in your gut that you should push back and get involved, peacefully or politically, and explain to them why, just maybe why, that they can be wrong. Sometimes they get things wrong. Why is that? Because they're only human, right? And it just frustrates me. But the one of the few positive things in crypto, I believe, is another phrase that we can all relate with. Proof of soon. PULSECHAIN.com. Free speech signing out.